What happens when a beloved actor walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a friendly chat and instead gets ambushed with personal attacks that cross every line imaginable? In just 34 seconds of one shocking comment, Denise Welch would trigger a moment so explosive that Sean Bean would do something he had never done before on live television. Walk off, and he would take the entire audience with him. Sean Bean arrived at the studio that morning like he had done dozens of times before on other shows. Relaxed, smiling, ready to talk about his latest project. The veteran actor known for his roles in Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones had been around the block. He had handled tough interviews. He had dealt with awkward questions, but nothing could prepare him for what was about to happen. The show started normally enough. Sean walked out onto the stage. The audience clapped. He took his seat on the famous purple sofa. The other panelists smiled and welcomed him. Everything seemed fine, perfect even. But Denise Welch had other plans. Right from the beginning, something felt off. While the other hosts asked Sean about his new series, Denise sat back with this look on her face. Not curious, not friendly. Something else entirely. She was waiting, watching, planning her moment. Then it started. "So Sean," Denise said, cutting off another panelist mid-quest, "let us talk about your personal life for a moment." The studio got quieter. Sean shifted in his seat, but kept his composure. "Sure. What would you like to know?" "Well," Denise continued, leaning forward with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "You've been married 4 times. 4 times, Sean? That is quite a lot, is it not?" The audience made an uncomfortable sound, a collective intake of breath. The other panelists glanced at each other. This was already getting personal. Too personal. But Sean handled it with grace. "I have, yes," he said calmly. "I would be the first to admit that relationships have not always been my strong point. But I have learned from each experience, and I am grateful for where I am now." It was a perfect answer. Humble, honest, mature. Any reasonable host would have moved on. But Denise was just getting started. "Grateful," she repeated, her voice dripping with something that sounded like mockery. "That is an interesting word choice. I wonder if your ex-wives feel grateful." Sean's jaw tightened just slightly, but he maintained his composure. "I think that is a question you would have to ask them. I can only speak for myself." The other panelists tried to jump in, tried to steer the conversation somewhere else, anywhere else. But Denise was having none of it. No, she said, holding up her hand. "I think this is important. You see, Sean, you come on shows like this and you talk about your work and everyone loves you. But what about the pattern? What about the fact that you seem to leave a trail of broken relationships behind you?" The audience was dead silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. This was not banter. This was not playful teasing. This was an attack. And everyone in that studio knew it. Sean took a deep breath when he spoke. His voice was steady, but you could hear the frustration building underneath. "With respect, Denise, I came here to talk about my work. My personal relationships are exactly that. Personal. I have never claimed to be perfect, but I do not think it is fair or appropriate to sit here and have my entire romantic history put on trial." It was a reasonable response, a professional response. He was setting a boundary, clear and firm. Most hosts would have heard that and backed off. Not Denise Welch. She actually laughed. A short, sharp sound that made the whole thing even more uncomfortable. "Oh, come on, Sean. You are a public figure. This is what you signed up for. If you cannot handle a few honest questions, maybe you should not be doing interviews." That was the moment. The moment where everything changed, because what Denise had just done was not asking honest questions. It was belittling someone for setting boundaries. It was mocking someone for asking to be treated with basic respect. Sean stared at her for a long moment. "I have been doing interviews for over 30 years, he said quietly. "I have answered thousands of questions about my life and my work. But there is a difference between an interview and an interrogation. And there is a difference between being interested in someone and trying to humiliate them on live television." The other panelists looked shocked. The audience started murmuring. This was escalating fast. One of the other hosts, trying to defuse the situation, jumped in quickly. "Right. Well, let us move on, shall we? Sean, tell us about the new series. What can viewers expect?" But Denise was not done. "Not even close." "No, hang on." She interrupted again, her voice getting louder. "I think Sean is being oversensitive here. We ask all our guests about their lives. It is what we do on this show. Why should he get special treatment?" Sean turned to look directly at her. "Because you are not asking questions. You are making accusations. There is a difference." Accusations. Denise practically spat the word. I am stating facts. You have been married 4 times. That is not an accusation. That is reality. The fact itself is not the problem, Sean replied. His voice still controlled but getting firmer. It is the way you are wielding it like a weapon. The tone, the judgment, the complete lack of basic courtesy. The audience started clapping. Not loud, not everyone, but enough that you could hear it. They were on Sean's side. They could see what was happening. They could see who was being unreasonable here. And that seemed to make Denise even angrier. "Oh, so now I am being discourteous," she said, her voice rising. "This is unbelievable. You come on our show, you sit on our sofa, and then you have the audacity to criticize how we conduct our interviews." Sean shook his head slowly. "Your show invited me. I did not ask to be here. And yes, I do think you are being discourteous. I think you are being rude, actually, and I think you know it." The tension in that studio was incredible, electric, dangerous. The other panelists looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. The cameras kept rolling. The audience was completely silent again, watching this unfold like a car crash in slow motion. Denise leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "Well," she said, her voice cold now, "if you find our questions so offensive, maybe you should leave." It was meant as a challenge. A power play. She was calling his bluff, expecting him to back down, expecting him to apologize, expecting him to remember that he was the guest and she was the host. And that was how the hierarchy worked. But Sean Bean did not back down. He stood up just like that. Calm, deliberate. He stood up from the purple sofa and started removing his microphone. The studio erupted. The audience gasped. The other panelists started talking over each other, trying to convince him to stay. But Sean was done. "Sean, wait," one of the other hosts said, reaching out. "Please do not go. We can sort this out." But Sean just shook his head. "I appreciate that," he said kindly to her. "I really do, but I did not come here to be treated like this. Nobody should have to sit here and be treated like this." Denise stood up too now, her face red. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "You are being ridiculous." Sean turned to face her one last time, and when he spoke, his voice was not angry. It was not loud. It was just sad, disappointed. "No, Denise," he said quietly. "What is ridiculous is that you think this is acceptable. What is ridiculous is that you genuinely cannot see anything wrong with how you have behaved in the last 10 minutes. That is what is ridiculous." And then he started walking toward the exit. That was when the audience did something. Nobody expected. They started clapping. Not politely, not slowly, loudly, enthusiastically standing up. Dozens of people in that studio audience rose to their feet and applauded Sean Bean as he walked off the set. Some were even cheering. The other panelists looked stunned. Denise looked furious. The producers in the control room were probably having a collective heart attack. This was live television. This was not supposed to happen, but it was happening. As Sean reached the exit, he turned back one more time and gave a small wave to the audience. They cheered louder. Then he was gone. Just walked right out of the studio, left the building, left the show, back on the set. Chaos reigned. The other hosts were trying to regain control, trying to figure out what to say, how to move forward. But the audience was still on their feet, still clapping. Some of them were actually walking out too, following Sean's lead, making their own statement about what they had just witnessed. Denise stood there, microphone in hand, watching her studio empty out. "Well," she said, trying to sound defiant, but you could hear the uncertainty creeping into her voice. "I suppose we should go to a commercial break." But before they could cut away, one of the other panelists spoke up. Her voice was shaking, but she said it anyway. "Denise," she said, "that was not okay. What you did to him, that was not okay." The camera caught the look on Denise's face. Shock, anger, denial all at once. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time that whole interview, Denise Welch was speechless. Then they cut to commercial. Back in the green room, Sean was collecting his things. His publicist was there, phone already ringing off the hook. His agent was texting frantically, but Sean himself seemed calm, calmer than he had been on the sofa. "Actually, are you all right?" his publicist asked, worry written all over her face. Sean nodded. "I am fine." Better than fine, actually, that was. She paused, searching for the word. That was quite something. It needed to happen, Sean said simply. She crossed a line, multiple lines, and nobody was stopping her. Word spread through the building fast. Crew members came up to Sean to shake his hand, to tell him they thought what he did was brave, that someone needed to stand up to that kind of behavior. Even some of the show's own staff admitted they were uncomfortable with how the interview had gone. Outside the studio, news was already breaking. Social media was exploding. People who had watched live were posting clips, sharing their reactions, and the response was almost unanimous. People were on Sean's side overwhelmingly, completely. Because here's the thing, everyone watching could see exactly what had happened. They saw a guest arrive ready to do a professional interview. They saw him get ambushed with personal attacks disguised as questions. They saw him try repeatedly to steer things back to appropriate territory. They saw him set boundaries. And they saw those boundaries get trampled on. And then they saw him do something radical, something rare, something that guests almost never do. No matter how badly they are being treated, he stood up for himself. He walked away. He decided that his dignity was more important than staying in a situation where he was being disrespected. And the audience loved him for it. Because in that moment, Sean Bean was not just standing up for himself. He was standing up for every person who has ever been in a situation where someone with power was abusing that power. Every employee who has been berated by a boss. Every person who has been bullied and told they are being oversensitive. Every individual who has been made to feel like they have to just sit there and take it, because that is what you do. Sean showed them something else was possible. Back in the studio, the show tried to continue. They came back from commercial. The remaining panelists attempted to carry on like nothing had happened, but the energy was gone. The confidence was shattered. Denise tried to act like everything was fine, but you could see it in her eyes. She knew she had messed up. She knew the audience was not with her. Later, someone would leak what happened during the next commercial break. Apparently, there was a heated discussion among the panelists. The other hosts confronted Denise about her behavior, told her she had gone too far, that she had been unprofessional, that she had embarrassed the show. Denise reportedly tried to defend herself, said she was just doing her job, said Sean was being too sensitive, said that if he could not handle tough questions, he should not be in the public eye, but nobody was buying it anymore. One panelist allegedly said something that cut right to the heart of it. There is a difference between tough questions and cruel questions. What you did was cruel, and you know it was. The show limped through the rest of the episode. Viewers turned off in droves. The ratings for that day would be some of the worst the show had ever seen. Not because people were not interested, but because they were disgusted. Because they had seen something that made them uncomfortable. Something that felt wrong. And they voted with their remote controls. Meanwhile, Sean Bean had already left the building, got in his car, drove away, did not give a statement, did not post on social media, did not try to capitalize on the moment. He just went home because for him, it was not about making a scene. It was not about getting attention or going viral. It was about self-respect. It was about knowing when enough is enough. The clip of Sean walking off would be watched millions of times. The standing ovation from the audience would become iconic. People would talk about it for years. Use it as an example. Reference it when discussing the importance of boundaries and dignity. But in all of that, what often got lost was the simplicity of what actually happened. A man was invited somewhere. He was treated poorly. He asked for basic respect. He did not get it. So he left. That is it. That is the whole story. But somehow in our culture, that simple act of self-preservation became revolutionary because we have normalized so many situations where people are expected to just endure to smile through discomfort, to laugh off insults, to accept disrespect as the price of admission. Sean Bean reminded everyone watching that you do not have to do that. You can leave. You can stand up. You can say this is not okay and I will not participate in it. And when he did that, when he made that choice, something remarkable happened. Other people followed. The audience stood with him. Literally, they applauded him. They walked out with him because they recognized something true in that moment. They recognized dignity. The whole incident raised bigger questions too. Questions about how we treat celebrities. About the relationship between hosts and guests. About what constitutes entertainment versus exploitation. About where the line is between probing questions and personal attacks. Denise had clearly thought she was within her rights. She was the host. This was her show. She could ask what she wanted, push as hard as she wanted, and the guest should just sit there and take it, because that is the game. That is how it works. But Sean challenged that entire framework. He said, "No, that is not how it has to work. Being a host does not give you license to be cruel. Having a platform does not mean you can abuse it. And being a guest does not mean surrendering your basic human dignity at the door. In the days and weeks that followed, the incident would be analyzed from every angle. Talk shows would discuss it. Articles would be written about it. People would debate who was right and who was wrong. But for anyone who actually watched it happen, there was not much debate. The video was clear. The dynamics were obvious. One person was trying to have a professional conversation. Another person was trying to score points by tearing them down. One person set boundaries. Another person trampled them. One person maintained their composure until they could not anymore. Another person kept pushing and pushing until something broke. And when it broke, when Sean finally stood up and walked away, it was not an overreaction. It was not being oversensitive. It was not throwing a tantrum or being difficult. It was just a human being saying, "I deserve better than this," and he was right. The moment Sean Bean walked off that set, he taught millions of people watching something valuable. He showed them that you do not have to accept mistreatment just because someone has a microphone, or a camera, or a position of authority. He showed them that walking away is sometimes the most powerful thing you can do. He showed them that dignity is not something you have to sacrifice for anything or anyone. That purple sofa had seen hundreds of guests over the years. Celebrities, politicians, authors, musicians. They came, they Saturday, they answered questions. They laughed at jokes. They played the game. But on that day, one guest decided the game was rigged, and instead of playing along, he changed the rules entirely. He just stood up and walked out. And in doing so, Sean Bean had his finest moment. Not in Lord of the Rings, not in Game of Thrones, not in any scripted drama or action film, but in real life, on live television. When it actually mattered, he showed everyone watching what integrity looks like, and they gave him a standing ovation for